Hello. So I have a nice long set of chapters today rather than the short ones that I had yesterday. Um, it's chapter 6 and chapter 7. And is there anything else I needed to say? Nope, that's it. Here we go. Lloyd had listened to his new records and finished his book. He'd made breakfast, then lunch, then dinner. He'd rearranged the furniture around the fireplace. Now he'd walked to the bald summit of the mountain and was sitting to watch the sun's nightly show, all to avoid thinking of the letters and their sender. Who did they think they were? A voice whispered from inside him. Who do you think you are? Lloyd addressed his answer to the sun, to the wildness, to the world that was clawing him back. Why ask me as if I'm some kind of authority? Aren't you? Aren't you the one who judged the whole world and decided you were better off alone? How dare you claim not to be an authority? It's just the damn Darby yokels trying to get me to move away. Check the camera then, the voice taunted. I don't need to check it every day. I don't care about this prank that much. What if there's a letter today? It'll be just like the other two. Why haven't you replied? Because it's a prank! Lloyd's voice rose to a yell that the sky swallowed without comment. He hadn't even realized he was speaking aloud. The sun tapped his conductor's baton and began his allegro with symphonic discipline, alternating high and low tones like musical movements and sending ballet-slippered cirrus from stage south northward into blue-black obscurity, generously lighting each in her turn as she paraded past his throne. Lloyd humbled, swallowed, and watched until the steady sinking curtain of star-spangled Empyrean cast its shadow over the last ruby-contoured dancer. Then he walked back to his truck and rumbled down the hill to the mailbox, too caught by inertia to reconsider once he was underway. There was another letter, the same as the others. Lloyd downloaded the camera's memory to his laptop and clicked through the clips one by one. They were each no more than 20 seconds long and were mostly triggered by birds flitting past the lens. There was a deer here and there, and even what looked like a wolf in one. No one went near the mailbox except John. Lloyd's suspicions, then, were confirmed. It had to be the mailman. The day the second letter came, when Lloyd thought he'd ruled him out, John must have slipped the envelope in the box when Lloyd tried to excuse himself. Now all that remained was to catch him in the act. If Lloyd threatened to tell his supervisor about the illicit mail he was delivering for free, John would cave and give up the joke surely. That ought to put an end to the chatty banter, too, Lloyd thought, with not a little relish, though I'll have to start checking my packages for anthrax. The next day, Lloyd lay in wait, no longer internally joking about how serious he was taking this. The camera was set to record constantly, and Lloyd had used it to show that the mailbox was empty before walking backwards to where he'd mounted it, never taking the mailbox out of view. From the time code on yesterday's clip, he knew that John arrived at about 4:30 in the evening. Lloyd's plan was to hide behind a tree as his prey came and went, then walk with the camera back to the mailbox and pull the mail out piece by piece until he found the letter. He was almost giddy as 4:30 neared, but then it passed. Soon it was 5, and Lloyd needed desperately to pee. He stood and unzipped himself, but as soon as he started, the sound of a small engine whined up the road. Cursing, he turned to face the tree he was hiding behind, pointing his stream down against the bark to quiet it, and trying to angle it so it wouldn't splash, but failing and covering his boots in unpleasant-smelling droplets. The engine didn't even slow as it passed. Where the hell was the mailman? Then a terrible thought suddenly occurred to Lloyd, and slid almost instantly, into a certainty. It was Sunday. Fuck! Lloyd yelled into the apathetic forest. Furious with himself and flush with badly released tension, he stalked to the camera and reset it for tomorrow. He was about to jump in the truck when a compulsion seized him. Perhaps it was a habit built from the last few days of obsession, or a need to assure himself of his sanity, or just plain madness, that made Lloyd check the mailbox one more time. A blank white envelope lay alone on the floor of the mailbox, centered as though placed with great care by a fastidious clerk. Lloyd stared at it for a moment, reached for it, then took his hand back. He stepped back through the gate, breaking into a run to the truck for his laptop, then to the camera. He watched the entire tape. He sat, after a while, not minding the slight dampness of the soil seeping up through his jeans, not noticing the fading light until it was gone. The tape showed what he already knew. No one had touched the mailbox. The laptop battery's last beeping requiem jarred him from stillness. It was dark. He was cold. He walked slowly back to the gate and picked up the envelope with a shivering hand. He drove to the house, walked to the summit of the mountain, and paced for a long time, looking out over the wilderness, looking up at the star-grained sky. From time to time he slapped the still-shut envelope against his hand as though emphasizing some oratory point. At last he was still for a moment. He faced the wildness, on eye level with distant inky peaks, and let his muscles slacken, let his doubts fall from him and run down the slope, into the tributary at its base, and then out into the natural darkness. He returned home, opened the letter, sat, and started to write. Chapter 7. Gabe arrived a few minutes late to class, so his apology to Donovan would have to wait. He sat in his accustomed position in the back of the classroom and started the process of tuning out the professor, who was making an argument about the theoretical limits of distributed computing that Dr. Arthouse had pretty well demolished in a paper he wrote last year. Gabe's distaste for stupid wasn't limited to students. He was spending the class sketching the gatekeeper in red pencil, and it was turning out surprisingly not terrible when the door to the classroom tried to burst open but was forestalled by its pneumatic hinge. Nevertheless, 3 black-suited, muscle-bound men strode through it with quick, curt steps, followed by the president of the college, who Gabe remembered because he looked astonishingly like a fat Albert Einstein. Gabe, in synchronicity with half the class, pulled on his headphones cable to pop them out of his ears and sat a bit straighter. "Your attention, please," Albert rumbled. "I am Humphrey Gilbert, president of this university. Please excuse our interruption, Professor." He turned to look at the instructor, failed to conjure her name, and finished with, "Forgive us." He turned back to the class. "Could we please borrow for a moment Mr. Gabriel Matherson?" Heads and eyes turned in a graduated wave towards the back of the room, where Gabe sat back as if pushed by the current of attention. He crossed his arms and pushed his chair up on its hind legs. Borrow him for what? There was a buzzing from the students at his impertinent tone. Albert looked back and forth as if for the man in charge, realized that it was himself, and falteringly replied, It seems as though you were recently involved in some overzealous access to a computer system that you were not, strictly, legally speaking, permitted to access. Could you come with us, please?" Now the buzz became a pronounced murmur. "The only system I've accessed is General Dynamics." There was a flash of recognition on every face in the room. "We've all been accessing it." Now one of the meatheads stepped forward and said, in a voice which dwarfed Albert's and carried across the room with the ease of an Arctic icebreaker, "Could you please come with us now, Mr. Matherson?" Gabe didn't like his tone. It didn't admit any response but yes, which made It didn't admit any reply but yes, which made Gabe's response a foregone conclusion. "No. Unless I'm under arrest, I think I'll stay in class." The meathead was unperturbed. "Mr. Matherson, we work for General Dynamics, not law enforcement. We're not here to arrest you. We're here to offer you a job." The room went silent. There was a freshly waxed limousine outside the building. the door of which was opened by the main meathead with a deference that somehow seemed to border on disdain. Inside its cool confines, a young woman waited. When the door closed, she handed him a manila envelope and began speaking in clipped, well-formed words. "This is your hiring packet. Inside you'll find all the information you need, including health, dental, vacation, and your salary offer. There's a checklist in front of all the things you need to fill out. Make sure you fill out everything on the checklist. You'll hand it in when you report to your supervisor, which will be in 2 weeks. That should give you enough time to get your affairs in order and get temporary lodging in Fairfax. Do you have any questions?" Gabe was overwhelmed. Was this what General Dynamics was like? The inside of the limo was a sexual feast of brushed steel and leather with invisible stitching. This woman was a part of it. Her black, professional but still sexy dress blurred her hips into the long bench seat, her dark shoes invisible against the carpet. She and the limo were an internally combusting centaur, dripping efficiency and power. Working for these people would be insane. "Who are you?" he asked, to stop the pause from becoming more uncomfortable. "My name is Catherine. I'm the first executive assistant to the chief executive officer of General Dynamics. I like well-muscled, older, powerful men, so could you please keep your eyes on my face?" He snapped his gaze up from her legs. "Because I am so out of your league." Her coy smile was his dismissal. He pulled the door open and climbed out, but stopped halfway. "Did you say Fairfax, like Virginia Fairfax?" She didn't even look up from her BlackBerry. "Yes, like Virginia." The door slammed. Fairfax. Gendine headquarters. Gabe's head spun. The meatheads climbed into black Suburbans that slid into place around the limo, and the whole motorcade glided off like a succubus whose work was done. Gabe went home, not bothering with class again. Ever again, in all likelihood. He blew past his mother, who was carrying a half-devoured meatloaf from the living room to the kitchen. He closed his door and looked around, thinking of how he was going to move all his stuff across the country. All he really needed was his computer and some clothes. The furniture was all crap anyways, and it would be an expensive pain to haul. Gabe had never lived anywhere but this house, and he suddenly realized how different everything would be. He sat at his desk and opened the thick manila brick, pulling out the entire contents. Atop the promised checklist was a note on official letterhead. "Hi, Gabe. I'll be your direct supervisor when you get here, and I wanted to clear up a few things that none of these other assholes will think to tell you. First, don't worry about school. Having the job you're going to have will be enough of a qualification for anything you could ever want to do in this field. Second, you are exactly the right guy to do the job we hired you for. Don't worry that you'll get here and we'll send you back or anything. I can't say more than that in writing, but don't stress. Third, you're going to get a huge advance. It'll make you a little nuts, but save some of it to pay your taxes and get a house and shit. Fairfax is expensive. Looking forward to meeting you, Adam Weber." Adam Weber couldn't have been more wrong about what Gabe would need to be reassured of, but his last point made Gabe rip the letter off its staple to get deeper into the packet. There was a smaller manila folder underneath stamped "Important, do not discard." Gabe ripped it, tore off the finicky sides of the anti-tamper check inside, and opened it. For a moment he didn't understand the financial lingo across the top, and his eyes jumped down to the line marked "Hiring Bonus." As he scanned across to the corresponding number, he felt his heartbeat quicken. That couldn't be right. He scanned again. Gabe pounded his fist on the table. "No way!" he yelled. "No fucking way!" He certainly didn't need to worry about shipping costs anymore. So there we go. Shit's about to hit the fan. Stay tuned. Rate, comment, and subscribe.